Alright, now the moment we've all been waiting for. Pulling the engine itself. Now this is a little bit of a scary thing, just because y'all have to wait here. Now I've got kind of really sketchy setup just on a tree, but I'm hoping it'll work. If it doesn't, well, who knows. But what I'm going to go ahead and do is there's a couple foot pegs here. Now I want to actually use these jack stands to put the weight of the tractor on, because these are pretty strong foot pegs here. They are steel, I believe, or at least cast iron, the minimum. And so they are fairly strong. And so I'm going to pull out. The thing is, we got to pull out. You can see kind of there's a ball in here. This thing literally just comes off. We'll yank out this ball and we'll stick that part back on there so we can set the weight of the tractor on it later. Just like that on both sides. And then next thing will be to disconnect the steering, which I'll just take out that wedge nut right there. Okay, so you can see this piece, it sits on here just like that. It literally just pulls right off. And the next challenge will be to actually pull this basically stabilizing bar off. Now I've got the tractor in the air a little bit right now. Front wheels are completely off the ground, so I'm going to probably have to use a pry bar or a hammer or something to get this out, but it shouldn't be. So unfortunately, the sucker's a little bit more stubborn to come off. These bars originally didn't want to come out. Now, at least on the other side didn't, so I ended up just using a couple jack stands and my old drawbar, but I'm sure just a big solid chunk of wood would also work, because I'm going to be supporting the bottom of this transmission, because I'm going to be next pulling off the front end of this. Now there's, I believe, 6 bolts up here. One here, another one down there, and they're just all around the bottom. And then with the steering disconnected, after I disconnect these wedge pins, this whole section should just come right there. Okay, so these wedge pins, really, they just hammer out from this backside, but I'm going to have to get a punch or something like that for the other, so I can push it all the way through, because there's basically kind of like a little notch this resting that's holding this on. So you got to have this pin all the way out in order for this top part to come off. All right, now it's literally all about just hammering off this piece, just like that. It should just come right off. And the same procedure for the other side, of course. It's very similar. Now, there's some different models that have different styles, of course, that might not be like this. But I don't remember if there's any mid-year change. But if you've got the wedge pin style like I do, then well, this is what you got to do. So here you go. And I believe some people actually did also replace this is here, the wedge pin. I believe some people actually replace these with just regular old bolts. But as long as I can still reuse these, I think I'm going to go ahead and reuse it. Okay, so now what we're doing, I'm taking out, there's 6 bolts on the front that's holding on this front end. I started loosening them. So we'll just take these 6 out. There's 2 on either side, and then there's also going to be 2 right down here at the bottom that you got to loosen up too. So if they're originally, should both be 11/16. As I can see, I got this front end. Literally, you can just roll it out, and watch out for these stabilizer bars. It'll kind of just fall apart like that, but it ain't the biggest in the world. That's just kind of how it sits. And I didn't mess with the steering over here. Try not to take this top off, because then it's a pain in the rear to get the steering all back right. And try not to mess with these tie rod ends. If your tractor's already aligned, you don't want to lose the alignment. But right now I've got the tractor supported by the engine, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to lower down this right here so I can set the rear end of it now on these 2 jack stands. So I'll go ahead and get to that, so hopefully I can take pressure off and I can get the engine taken off then. Alright, got the weight of the tractor pretty much off of this. So it's starting, majority of weight starting to sit on this sucker. I went ahead and put these other jack stands on the foot pegs just to have a little extra safety measure. Whenever I restored one, we made a mistake of, well, we actually had the front of this transmission on a jack, and we were without the engine on it, and we were rolling it backwards, and well, the transmission fell off of the jack because it hit a piece of dirt. The tractor kept rolling backwards, and the bottom of this actually hit the concrete ground, and it shattered the bottom out of this transmission. So I know these things can break. Don't make the mistake I did, and if you're gonna put something, make sure you have plenty of jacks to hold it, just to play it safe. So right now I'm now loosening up these bolts around the base of the bell housing. Now these bolts, they go all the way around, okay, and there's even a couple underneath. You got to make sure you get those as well. And one thing is, if you have any of these bolts that might be stuck, one thing I found helps is if you have your wrench, you can literally hit it with a hammer. And sometimes that tapping action, well, if you hit it a bunch of times, it'll actually break the rust loose. And it generally works pretty well. And I'll also try a little penetrating oil too, but right now I'm loosening them a little bit at a time. That way we can kind of even up the pressure, because this is cast iron, folks, and it will break, and I definitely don't want it to. So I'm going all the way around, doing a little bit at a time to make sure that cast iron doesn't crack. So once we get these bolts out, we should be able to swing this engine forward. It's just mated together at the clutch by just basically a spline shaft right there. And once you get these bolts out, the engine just slides right forward. Well, I'm going to go ahead and put some of these bolts actually back in now. And then that way I can hopefully disassemble, take some more stuff off of this, maybe drain the oil too, before I go ahead and completely tear into it. There are 2 bolts holding on this here distributor up front, just 2 right here, 1/2 inch. Pull these suckers out, and then don't worry about the timing of the distributor. You can just yank it right off. There's only one way it goes on, and that's the correct way, so there's not really any aligning to do, as long as you don't mess with the internals of the distributor itself. You should be in good shape. So we'll just get this sucker and we'll yank it right off here real quick. Break that gasket seal, of course. Yeah, I'll get it. A distributor, I end up using a screwdriver to kind of pound it out, and then just pulls right off there. So you can see here is that little spline, or that little notch there. It goes in over here. So there is really only one way to put it in. So let me go ahead and set this sucker off to the side. I'll take care of that later. I've got, whenever you get the rebuild kit, it comes with all new of this stuff for this anyway, so you might as well take it all off. And then next, I guess I'll go ahead and take out this oil filter housing, and then hopefully I can eventually get down and drain the oil too. Alright, I'm yanking off this water pump right now, just right up front. There's both up here, here, down here, and then one up top as well. 4 of them, and at least on here they appear to be 1/2 inch. So we'll just take the sucker and yank it off. So there's these 3 bolts actually. There's only one on this side, one here, and then one on the bottom as well. We'll just pull that. Yeah, you can take a look at the water pump here. How rusty that is in there. I might end up replacing this thing anyways, but I'll hopefully clean it up, and then we'll get a good look at the condition of it later and see if that'll be something to replace or not. But for now, we got it off. And yeah, look at that stuff in there. That's just rust. Yuck. It'll definitely be good to, you can definitely tell this engine's seen better days. Oh, it's water out of here too. On the bright side, there's doesn't look like there's any water in the oil, so it's definitely a good sign. Alright, here on the governor, over here on the right hand side, 2 bolts holding it on. There's a lower there, and then there's a nut on a stud that's holding it up top. Oops, there goes that bolt or nut, and then a washer, and then get that off. I went ahead and I already used a screwdriver and kind of busted this loose a little bit, and then it should hopefully pull right out. Looks like I need a little more beating on it, so I'm just literally jamming it in there like this, and then beating on it with a hammer. So I'll show you guys kind of what I'm doing, just like that. Alright, I don't know if I got that on video or not, but here we go. Oh, there's the governor. Look at that. You can see right inside there, it's kind of a reddish primer. That's kind of how a lot of the Fords, what they put on the inside. I guess it just prevents rust mostly. But this here is the governor. We'll take it apart later maybe, and might as well see if it needs rebuilt. I don't think it needs to be, although it might be a little weak, so I might go ahead and rebuild that. We'll see. So we got that off, and now basically all that's left here is the rest of this is all part of the timing cover. You can actually see the timing gear in there. But that's why one of the things you got to be careful with is they actually installed a stud up here. Well, if you were to put a bolt in there, and if that bolt's too long, it'll actually hit against this timing gear and it'll lock the engine up. So if you do switch, if you mess up that stud or you don't have a stud, make sure you don't put a bolt in too far, otherwise it'll cause it to lock up and the engine won't turn over. So it's something to be aware of. Pulling the carburetor is pretty easy. You loosen these 2 bolts up top, one here and one here, and then it should just drop right out. So if you never change one of these, consider yourself lucky, but now at least you know how to do it. Okay, so I just pulled the drain plug for the oil. It's just Mine's kind of worn out, but of course making a mess big over here. But now I should be able to pull out the oil filter housing. I'm hoping I can just leave this in here. It'd be nice to reuse that oil filter, just because I changed oil not very long ago. But no, there's a couple, looks like 9/16. The only two holding it on. And then of course make sure the lines are all disconnected, and you should be able to pull it out. Right, so here I go. I just pulled out the starter right now. It's got two 7/16" bolts over here that you pull them out, but they go all the way through. But be careful, because they are also used to hold together the starter, and they screw into the block. So I don't know if you want to find some nuts or something to put on there. I might do that, because if these things fall apart, your starter will fall apart. So just basically get those two bolts out, and then the starter just wiggle around and it pulls right out. So now I'm working on pulling off this exhaust manifold, and guys, one of the reasons, the main reason I don't recommend buying an aftermarket exhaust manifold is, well, especially the one I got, I believe, from Untitled Chapter, is, well, you can see, if you take a look, you can get a wrench on all these exhaust manifold bolts, or the nuts, which is exactly what you need to do to access it. Well, the problem is, the back one, you physically cannot get a wrench on, because you can see there's such a small space there. So focus, there we go, you see that small space. It's not big enough to put a socket in. So what I'm having to do is I'm actually using a punch here with a hammer to actually loosen up that nut. It's a complete pain in the rear, and whatever engineers designed this thing obviously weren't thinking, and this is one of the problems, and that's why I think a lot of engineers need to actually have real world experience doing this stuff. So, you know, I am a studying mechanical engineer, and I can tell you that these guys, I don't know what they were thinking, but they definitely weren't thinking, that's for sure. But like I said, hopefully just use a punch or something like that, and you can hit the sides of it and get that sucker out. So with that exhaust manifold off, I got chain hooked up around it, and I'm going to go ahead and once again try to pull off this engine from the rear end. So it's going to loosen up the bolts that I put, or 4 bolts that I put back in, and hopefully I can get it long enough. Alright, just got the engine free. I ended up using just a chisel, and I kind of just tapped on this little edge here, and I was able to break it free, and now, finally, there it goes. There's the engine. Hopefully this thing will hold it. It isn't that heavy of an engine anyways, but there you go. You can see that's the spline shaft there for the clutch that was being held on, and of course there's the clutch too. Definitely looks like it's needs some wear and everything, but well, there's the engine. Got the sucker free, and you can actually see really how simple it is inside of this bell housing. Some of them actually will have another kind of transmission gear set in here. That's if you have the overdrive or underdrive transmission, but I just have the standard 3-speed, unfortunately. But it is what it is, and you know, it seems to work just fine, 3-speed. And well, there's the engine. Now next thing is get in the garage and start the disassembly.